It starts with a crackle on the radio, a nervous announcer reading a statement that changes a country forever. Then, soldiers appear on the streets of the capital, their faces grim, their authority absolute. Flags are lowered, presidents are detained, constitutions are simply gone. This isn't a scene from a movie, this is the new reality in West Africa. What began as a single spark, one coup in one nation, has caught fire, spreading across the arid plains of the Sahel. Now, a tidal wave of military takeovers is carving a path of instability right across the continent, a continuous belt of juntas stretching for thousands of kilometers. But this isn't just about soldiers seizing power. That's only where the story begins. This is about a catastrophic power vacuum being filled by some of the world's most ruthless jihadist groups. It's a crisis fueled by decades of corruption, supercharged by a flood of foreign weapons. And now, it's the stage for a new global power struggle. This is the story of how the Sahel, a region on the edge of the Sahara, became the world's newest powder keg. The fuse has already been lit. The question isn't just how this happened, but what it means for the rest of us when it finally explodes. Section 1, the coup contagion. To really get the scale of this crisis, you have to appreciate just how fast everything fell apart. The first domino fell in Mali in August 2020. Colonel Assimi Goïta seized power, promising to crush a raging insurgency and restore order. The world watched, concerned, but on the ground, many people felt a flicker of hope. Maybe a strong hand could solve what fragile democracies could not. That hope was a mirage. The coup in Mali wasn't a one-off event. It was a green light. In September 2021, Guinea fell. Then, in January 2022, it was Burkina Faso's turn. Soldiers led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré took control, making the very same promises. And then, in July 2023, the biggest domino of all tipped over. Niger, a country that was supposed to be the linchpin of Western security in the region, was taken over by its own presidential guard. In less than 3 years, a solid block of military-run states had formed, cutting a horizontal line across the map of Africa. This wasn't just a series of national crises, it was the birth of what experts are now calling the Coup Belt, the world's longest corridor of military rule. Each takeover emboldened the next. Each fallen government made it harder for the region to resist. The regional body, ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, tried to step in. It hit the juntas with sanctions and even threatened military action, but they just stood defiant. And they didn't just stand alone, they stood together. In a stunning political break, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger formally quit ECOWAS in January 2025. They didn't just leave, they created their own rival group. The Alliance of Sahel States, or AES, is a mutual defense pact, a confederation of juntas bound by a shared ideology and a common set of enemies. This has effectively sliced West Africa in two, creating a dangerous new fault line and torching decades of regional cooperation. So, how did it come to this? What deep-seated problems allowed these nations to crumble so quickly? To understand that, you have to look past the soldiers and into the societies they claimed they were saving. Section 2, the core problem, the power vacuum. These military juntas didn't just appear out of nowhere. They rose from the ashes of states that were already failing their people. For years, a toxic mix of problems created the perfect storm for a total collapse. First and foremost was a crisis of governance. Across the Sahel, civilian governments had become synonymous with mind-blowing corruption and incompetence. Billions of dollars from rich natural resources just vanished into the pockets of a tiny political elite, while most people saw zero benefit. Basic services like healthcare, clean water, and schools were either non-existent or falling apart, especially in the vast rural areas far from the capital. This wasn't just neglect. It felt like a deliberate abandonment. It created a deep well of public anger and destroyed any faith in democracy. For millions, democracy didn't mean progress. It meant a system that enriched a few and ignored everyone else. The soldiers who launched the coups knew this, and they used that popular rage as their calling card, claiming they were sweeping away a corrupt political class. On top of this, you have one of the most powerful forces on Earth: demographics. The Sahel has one of the youngest and fastest growing populations in the world. Over 64% of its people are under 25. That should be a country's greatest asset. Instead, it's become a source of immense pressure. You have millions of young, ambitious people entering adulthood with no jobs, no opportunities, and no real future. This massive youth bulge, feeling marginalized and desperate, is the dry tinder for instability. They are the faces in the protest crowds and the most vulnerable targets for recruitment by extremist groups. And it's that extremist threat that turned a crisis into a catastrophe. For over a decade, the Sahel has been the global epicenter for jihadist expansion. Groups tied to both Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, like JNIM and ES Sahel, have brilliantly exploited the government's absence. They move into neglected rural areas where there are no police, no army, and no officials. There, they present themselves as an alternative, offering a twisted kind of justice and order where the state offers nothing. Their strategy is brutal and smart. They attack military bases to prove the government is powerless. They control trade routes, run illegal mines, and build their own financial networks to fund their war. And they unleash unimaginable violence on anyone who resists, carrying out massacres and burning entire villages. The goal is to make the state's presence impossible and to rule through pure terror. The numbers tell a horrifying story. The Sahel is now the deadliest place on the planet for terrorism. According to the 2025 Global Terrorism Index, the region accounted for an astonishing 51% of all terrorism-related deaths worldwide in 2024. The violence has exploded, becoming more complex, with extremists now using drones and teaming up with criminal gangs. In just the first half of 2025, one group, JNIM, claimed it carried out 280 attacks in Burkina Faso alone, double the number from the year before. This tidal wave of violence is what finally broke the back of the civilian governments. They couldn't protect their own people or their own territory. Their legitimacy evaporated, clearing the path for the military to step in and promise to do what they couldn't. But the jihadists didn't come from nowhere, and their arsenals weren't built overnight. Their rise was turbocharged by a disaster hundreds of miles away, an event that unleashed a flood of chaos across the Sahara. Section 3, the accelerants, a flood of weapons and foreign failures. The smoldering fire in the Sahel was drenched in gasoline back in 2011. When Muammar Gaddafi's regime in Libya collapsed, it didn't just topple a dictator, it blew the doors off one of the largest military arsenals in North Africa. A torrent of sophisticated weapons, assault rifles, heavy machine guns, even anti-aircraft systems, flowed out of unguarded depots and began a long journey south across the desert. This flood of weapons changed everything, almost overnight. Local militias and separatist groups in northern Mali, who had their own long-standing grievances, were suddenly armed to the teeth. This is what lit the fuse on the 2012 rebellion in northern Mali, which was then almost immediately hijacked by jihadist groups. The newly empowered extremists crushed the Malian army, seized the entire northern half of the country, and created the perfect launchpad for their war across the Sahel. Gaddafi's fall provided the hardware for a holy war. Facing a new jihadist statelet in Mali, the international community, led by former colonial power France, intervened. Operation Serval in 2013 successfully pushed the extremists out of the major towns. It was followed by a larger region-wide mission called Operation Barkhane. For nearly a decade, thousands of French and other Western troops were on the ground, fighting a grueling counterinsurgency war. But it failed. Despite some tactical wins, the Western strategy couldn't stop the spread of jihadism. The violence didn't decrease, it metastasized, spreading from northern Mali into the center of the country, and then across the borders into Burkina Faso and Niger. For many people in the Sahel, it looked like the foreign troops were great at protecting the capital cities and the corrupt politicians they hated, but were failing to protect ordinary people in the countryside who were being slaughtered. A powerful anti-colonial narrative began to take hold, fanned by aggressive Russian disinformation campaigns. France was accused of being there not to fight terror, but to protect its economic interests, like the uranium mines in Niger, and to keep its political grip on its old empire. Anti-French protests became a regular sight in the streets. This simmering resentment was the perfect ideological fuel for the military coups. When the juntas took power, one of their first and most popular moves was to order the French and other European forces to pack their bags and leave. This created a security vacuum, and a new player was ready and waiting to step in: Russia. Mostly through its mercenary force, the Wagner Group, now rebranded as the Africa Corps, Russia offered the juntas a new deal. It was purely business, free from all the Western talk about democracy and human rights. Russia provides elite protection for the regime, military advisors, and propaganda support. In return, Russia gets strategic influence, military bases, and lucrative deals to exploit the region's vast mineral wealth, from gold in Mali to uranium in Niger. Russian influence has exploded. In Mali, the approval rating of Russia's leadership shot up to 89% by 2023. Russian flags are now a common sight at pro-junta rallies. Moscow has signed defense pacts and even a deal to build a nuclear power plant, cementing a long-term strategic partnership. This isn't just about security, it's a full-blown geopolitical realignment. The Sahel has become a key front in a new era of great power competition, a fierce struggle for influence that has shattered old alliances and is forging a new volatile map of Africa. Section 4, the new axis, a fortress of juntas. Expelling Western forces and embracing Russia was just the start. The decision by Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger to leave ECOWAS and form their own alliance of Sahel states was a geopolitical earthquake. It formalized the split in West Africa, creating a bloc of military-led nations ideologically opposed to the Western-aligned democracies in the rest of the region. The AES is quickly becoming more than just a defense pact. It's looking more like a confederation. The three juntas have announced plans for a joint military force. They've launched a common passport and are even hosting their own AES games to build solidarity. Most importantly, they're trying to break away from the established financial system. They plan to launch their own investment bank, funded by their own taxes, specifically to cut their dependence on foreign aid and the World Bank. This is a profound declaration of independence, a deliberate effort to build a parallel system on their own terms. All of this has created an incredibly tense standoff with the rest of ECOWAS, especially regional powers like Nigeria. Threats of sanctions or even military intervention from ECOWAS have been met with a chilling promise from the AES. An attack on one is an attack on all. This raises the terrifying prospect of a massive regional war, pitting the new alliance of juntas against their neighbors. The Sahel is no longer just a zone of insurgency. It's a region divided by hostile states, armed and backed by competing global powers. Section 5, the human catastrophe and global stakes. While generals and global powers play their geopolitical games, the people of the Sahel are trapped in a living nightmare. The consequences of this perfect storm of coups, conflict, and climate change are a humanitarian catastrophe of historic proportions. The statistics are so staggering they're hard to comprehend. Across the Sahel today, nearly 29 million people need humanitarian aid just to survive. The relentless violence has forced 8 million people from their homes. That's 8 million refugees and internally displaced people. 8 million lives uprooted, 8 million stories of loss. Many have been forced to flee over and over again. Violence against civilians isn't just a byproduct of the war, it's a core strategy. Jihadist groups and, in some cases, state security forces and their Russian allies are accused of committing horrific atrocities. In 2024 alone, over 6,800 people were killed in the violence. Entire communities are put under siege, cut off from food and aid, leading to starvation. Over 1 million girls are out of school because of the conflict, and women and girls face some of the highest rates of sexual violence in the world. As one UN official put it, life under terrorist control is one of erasure from public space. For the rest of the world, it's easy to see this as a distant tragedy. That would be a grave mistake. The crisis in the Sahel has profound and direct consequences for everyone. First, security. This contiguous belt of unstable military-run states is the perfect incubator for global terrorism. With Western counterterrorism efforts gone, these groups now have a vast, ungoverned space to train, plot, and launch attacks against international targets. Their capabilities are growing, and they're already pushing south, launching attacks in coastal states like Benin and Togo, threatening to destabilize the entire West African coast. Second, geopolitics. The Sahel is now a primary arena for the strategic rivalry between Russia and the West. Moscow is using its foothold to supplant Western influence, gain access to strategic ports and resources, and prove its model of authoritarian partnership works. This isn't a new Cold War, it's a hot one, fought through proxies in the heart of Africa, with the potential to draw in more and more outside powers. Third, resources and migration. The region is rich in critical resources, from uranium in Niger to gold and lithium. A long war threatens to disrupt these crucial supply chains. More urgently, the human cost will not stay contained. A humanitarian disaster on this scale will inevitably create massive waves of migration, putting immense pressure on North Africa and Europe. The crisis in the Sahel will eventually arrive at the world's borders. So, is West Africa the world's new war zone? It's a war on multiple fronts. A war of states against jihadists. A war of jihadists against civilians. It's an economic war against poverty and a climatic war against a changing planet. And now it is a geopolitical war for the soul of a continent. We are watching a perfect storm of failed governance, extremist ideology, foreign meddling, and intense great power competition. There are no easy answers. The juntas promise security but have so far delivered more violence. Western policies have failed, and Russia's new model seems to offer stability only for the regimes in charge, not for the people they rule. The institutions that were supposed to be a safety net, regional bodies, international alliances, democratic norms, have all been fractured or swept away. What's left is a landscape of immense suffering and even greater uncertainty. The future of the Sahel is being written today in blood and steel. With global powers choosing sides and the region's armies on a war footing, the question isn't if West Africa will erupt, but what the world will do when it does. The story of the Sahel is still being written. For more in-depth analysis on the forces shaping our world, subscribe and join the conversation.